You've heard it said, folks, the fight is on, and the question is this: how in the world do I get involved? How do I get engaged? Here's the answer. What do we do in a world that seems to be falling apart at the level that it's falling apart at? Well, let's answer that question. We're going to get into that really quickly. It starts with fear. Now, people tell me all the time, well, fear is of the devil, James. I just had somebody write me a nasty letter, basically telling me that I'm a heretic and that fear is of the devil and I'm a fearmonger and fear is of the devil. I'm about to defeat that argument in just a moment, because by defeating that argument, it's going to open up your eyes to see something that's critically important. So if you want to learn how to fight, take your notes, right? Write this stuff down. It's critically important. You want to learn how to fight, it starts with fear. So let's talk about different aspects of fear. The first point, when we say it starts with fear, means you must learn to fear God. If you learn to fear God before you fear anybody else, you have already won the battle. An overwhelming majority of learning how to win the battle that we fight on a day-to-day basis centers uniquely and specifically around understanding that it is your job to fear God. Proverbs chapter 3 makes this very clear to us. It tells us this: trust in the Lord with all of your heart and do not lean on your understanding, on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. Then it says something very interesting. The next verse: be not wise in thine own eyes, fear the Lord and depart from evil. So before I start down the list of all the things you need to do, the first characteristic associated with how you play this, it starts with fear. The question is, who are you fearing? If you're fearing man, if you're fearing input from other people, if you fear losing subscribers or followers, you've already lost. If you fear anything else other than God, you can't even go to the next step. You're done. You're over with. You go straight to jail. You're in bondage. It's a wrap. So the first question when we say that it starts with fear is, who exactly is it that you are choosing to fear? I choose to fear God. Now, we can apply this in a very practical circumstance. When this craziness went down a couple of years ago when they were telling us to shut our churches down, as a pastor of a church, I had to ask myself this question: who do I fear? Do I fear death? No, I don't fear death because God is with me. Do I fear the government? I can't fear the government because God supersedes and overpasses the government. Do I fear the laws of the land? I can't fear the laws of the land because God's word transcends all of that. Do I fear what people are going to think of me in church? I can't do that either, because if I'm going to lead the people that I'm called to lead in church, then I have to actively demonstrate to them that I fear God because I love God with all of my heart. And in choosing to fear God and loving him with all of my heart, people will see the example and want to move. So we start with the fear of the Lord. That's a very important aspect. We start with the fear of the Lord. Now, we also have to remove fear, right? Because we embrace the fear of the Lord. That's step one. And step two is, do we do what? We shun the fear of man. We shun the fear of consequence. We shun the fear of evil. We shun the fear of anything else that might come upon us. One of the things that God had to teach me to do 3-4 years ago, more than I've ever done before, is he had to teach me how to literally not be concerned about what the mainstream of guys in the ministry thought about me. He had to teach me to not be worried about what the government thinks of me. He had to teach me to not be worried about what people think of me. He had to teach me to not be worried about what anybody thinks of me, because when I choose to worry about those things, it means that I voided myself of the fear of God and I allowed myself to be filled with the fear of everything else. I used to not like it when people would call me a racist. I used to not like it when people would call me a conspiracy theorist. I used to not like it when people would call me all the kind of crazy things that they call me today. Now I look at it as a complete compliment. And the reason why I look at it as a complete compliment is because the God of heaven, let me say this again, the God of heaven has been with me the whole time. And I know that I do not have to worry about the repercussions of any action that I take so long as I walk in obedience to the God of heaven. That's what God told me to do. And folks, the life that I'm living right now is so much more fulfilled than any life I've ever lived in the past. I have been faithfully serving the Lord in ministry for 30 plus years, and I've enjoyed absolutely every bit of it. Yes, I have days that have been pretty bad. I had a couple of rough days recently. But the thing about it is, I have loved serving the Lord. There are so many people that if they were given instant fame in the Christian world, they would fall apart in moments. They would fall apart in seconds. You want to know why? Because the fear of God is void from within their hearts. For all of you guys that are wanting to know how you can get involved in this fight, this is how you do it, right? It starts with fear. It's a two-part process. One part you say, Lord, I'm going to fear you. The next part you say, Lord, I refuse to fear anything else that would come against you. Man, there were so many things that God had taught me in the last 3 or 4 years. Perhaps one of the greatest fears that I have was, how am I going to support my family? We've got these adoptions that we're seeking to do. How in the world, Lord, are we going to even afford this? I'm making some decisions that are going to put our livelihoods at direct risk. But how in the world is that going to happen? God, like, how in the world are we going to be able to do this? God blew my mind. God blew my mind in ways I never thought possible. God literally opened up my eyes to recognize the fact that if I simply feared him and did not fear anybody else or anything else, I would find myself in a position where I would grow in ways I never thought possible. And that's exactly what God has done. We eliminate ourselves of fear and we embrace other fears. The greatest fear to embrace is the fear of God, and every other fear we throw away. The second thing that we have to do is we have to talk about truth. Do you understand that if you recognize the fact that truth is the most critical component of the life that we live from day to day, that you will never have a reason to fear any repercussions of any other matter before you? You guys realize that? You guys realize that if you are a person that basically says, I want to commit myself to every element out there that encourages truth, you have no shaky ground. Greatest source of truth in existence right now, the Word of God. You are never going to find a better source for truth, because it doesn't exist, than this right here. The Word of God is our practical, functional, spiritual, every aspect you can think of. This is where we find all truth. All truth is founded in this beautiful book. But think about this for a second. If we learn to place our pursuit of truth in everything we can find in this, I believe in this so much that when I used to teach in the Bible college with some regularity, I would oftentimes tell my students that I don't want them to purchase any other textbook other than their Bible. Now, of course, there were some exceptions to this. If I was teaching Greek or Hebrew, if I was teaching something that required that you had to have something like that, I would normally require people to grab reference material that kind of helps them better understand things. Like, for example, if I taught through Isaiah or one of these other books that requires a more exponential knowledge of the circumstances that surrounds all of this stuff, then I would have told them something like, hey, go get a book of Nelson's complete book of Bible maps and charts. That might be a context in which I would encourage people to go do something. But the reality of it is, the only book that they need is the Bible. Why? Because the Bible is the only place where you're going to find unmitigated, unattenuated, powerful truths that can never be bent. So we learn to embrace the fear of God. We learn to reject all other fears, like the fear of man, the fear of death, and the fear of everything else. And then we learn to stand by truth at all costs. We pursue the truth at all costs. Perhaps one of the coolest dynamics that I see in the church right now that I just absolutely love is when I'm teaching, people are Googling me, people are looking things up, people are verifying the information that I'm giving them from the pulpit. I love it. It's because I have a group of people that are dedicated to hearing the truth, and they will not accept anything unless they can take it and find it in the Word of God. I absolutely love that. You hear a statement, your question must be, what is the truth? You have a question that's being asked of you, you have to ask yourself, how can I obtain a truthful answer? You have something that's being given to you that is presented as fact, you have to say, I need to fact check this. Be careful about fact checking conspiracy theories, because you might find out that an overwhelming majority of those are true. I'm just warning you, right? Think about this. This is very important. Then the next fact is this. This is something you have to do. This is so critical. If you do not get this figured out, you are going to be in trouble. Here it is. Here's the next step. Remember, recognize, realize, understand that the battle you are fighting is in the invisible. The battle that you are fighting is a spiritual battle. Ephesians chapter 6 tells us this. Ephesians says that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, right? But we are wrestling against principalities and powers, the rulers of darkness. We are fighting a spiritual war that cannot be seen. I'm going to read this to you. This is Colossians chapter 1. And I'm going to read starting in verse 15, and I'm going to read all the way through verse 18. It says this. Let me read this to you. This is starting in verse 15. It says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation, referring to Christ, right? Pay attention to this, folks. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth. Ready? Here we go. Here's the key. Visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. Pay attention to this, folks. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. Notice what the Apostle Paul is telling us here. He says that Christ is in the midst of everything. And the most important variable that exists besides that very statement is the fact that the Apostle Paul gives us, and by the way, it is one that bears a lot of significance. It is one that is important that we cannot forget. He basically tells us in the passage that I just read to you that everything that happens in the physical realm is a direct result of something that's happening in the spiritual. Think about the fact when you stop to reflect upon this very issue, that everything has an origin in the spiritual realm. It actually starts in the spiritual realm. I don't know about you guys, but the very moment you begin to realize that fact is the moment your life changes. Forgive me for saying this because this is going to bother some people, and I know that it's going to really ruffle some feathers. You have to start caring. You know, there's a lot of people that don't care. There's a lot of people that say, I don't care because it doesn't affect me. Well, eventually it will affect you. People in Nazi Germany said the same thing. I don't care because it doesn't affect me. Until they started taking away close friends and family members. Until they themselves started getting taken away. Do you know that there were groups that existed amongst the Jewish population that said they didn't really care what was going on in the nationalist movement that had existed under the leadership of Adolf Hitler? You cannot look at the nonsense that's going on right now in our nation and around the world and say, I don't care. You cannot do that. If you do that, you are in massive trouble. You are about to enter into a condition and a situation in which you are in a world of hurt. You have to start caring. Here's the other thing. In order to be able to be effective in this fight, you have to recognize we're in the last days. If you recognize that we're in the last days, you know what you're going to be inclined to do? You're going to be inclined to work harder than you ever have before. Because when the Lord comes from his church, do you want to be caught riding dirty? Do you want to be caught with your pants down? Do you want to be caught not caring? Do you guys understand the parable of the talents that Jesus gave in Matthew chapter 25 had nothing to do with money? Do you understand that the parable of the talents had everything to do with the fact that God had entrusted them with the message of the end times? And that there were people that chose not to be faithful with that message, and they were condemned for that very thing. You got to start caring. You got to recognize we're in the last days, because if you don't recognize we're in the last days, we're in a big problem. We have a really, really big problem, right? Here's the other question that you have to ask yourself. What is my worldview? There's a lot of people that meet all the check marks of every single item that I talked about, but then they throw away the idea of their biblical worldview. They throw away the idea of what the Bible actually says concerning many of the matters, because sometimes what the Bible says regarding many of those matters can be very offending. What is your worldview? Is it based on the Bible? Do you have a biblical worldview? I hope you do. Because if you do not, you're already dead in the water. That's exactly what needs to happen. We need to get you into that place. For all you people that ask me, what can I do? I just gave you the list. Here's the thing, and this is probably the last thing that I would tell you in context of all the things that we've been talking about here. You cannot care about people's reactions. You have to speak the truth. You have to do what God has asked you to do. Call people out, guys. When people make truth assertions, call them out. If you understand the formula that I just gave you, you will be successful in effecting change. It doesn't matter if you're somebody who doesn't have a home to live in or somebody that has 5 homes. It doesn't matter if you are in your 90s or if you're in your 20s. It doesn't matter if you're physically capable or physically incapable. It doesn't matter what it is. If you follow this set of guidelines, your life changes. Folks, I'm going to say this. I've said it many, many times. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Right now, in the world in which we live, you cannot afford to think any other way. Nobody, listen, none of us can afford to have the mindset that says, I'm just going to kick back right now. I have never seen a time and day where so many people have gone cold, where the love of many have waxed cold. I've never seen a time and day where the darkness has risen to levels like never before. I've never seen a time and day, guys, where the type of things that continue to show and manifest their ugly face stand contrary to God's word on so many levels, it's not even funny. I think more than ever in the time and day in which we are living, we cannot afford to go any other way than God's way. But you can't go God's way if you are not familiar with what the truth is. You cannot go God's way unless you have the standard. It's very, very important. Folks, please listen to me. We don't have the time to mess around. We are in the last day. Please, folks, please, please, please start fighting the battle. Start getting involved. This is such an important message. This is such a critical place for us. Please do not lose sight of the importance of this. Do not.